And good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday to you. Today is Wednesday, March 15th, and this is our 2 p.m. Press briefing. We're happy to have you with us today. It's been a very busy day, as you probably all know. We have had a surprise visit by the governor of California to Pajaro, and we also had a visit today from the Consul General of Mexico. The Consul General of Mexico was going to be joining us today, but she is still in Pajaro getting a tour of the damage over in Pajaro. So tomorrow she will be joining us. Today, we have with us from our County of Monterey Environmental Health Unit, we have Ricardo Inserino, and then also we have Elsa Jimenez, our director of our health department. Sorry about that, Elsa. And then we're also fortunate to have with us today our Caltrans Central Coast Division Public Information Officer, Kevin Drabinski. And then today as well, we have our United Way partner with 211, Ms. Katy Castagna, who is the president of the United Way. Our focus today is going to be on infrastructure, environmental health issues, and the road situations, which will be reported by Caltrans. And then we will also focus on the support for disaster victims. Because Ms. Castagna from United Way has to leave a little bit early for another meeting, I'm going to go ahead and ask Katy Castagna to start with her opening remarks. And welcome, Katy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nick. Again, I'm Katy Castagna, President and CEO for United Way Monterey County. We are the 211 provider for Monterey County, and we work with other 211s that are county-based throughout the state of California. A quick refresher, 211 is the 3-digit dialing code for non-emergency health and human services. It's a centralized resource database that is covered by live call specialists 24/7. We can also access the resources online through our local website, 211montereycounty.org. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about 211 in the context of our community infrastructure, because not only are we part of this disaster, but it is part of our human service safety net that we have as a county, as a community. And again, within the state of California, 211s are organized county by county, and it is a service that you'll find throughout the United States. We have been activated and working closely with the County Office of Emergency Services really since the very beginning of January in the current atmospheric river incidents. We have staff located within the EOC, and we have been able to maintain our resource database up to date with items such as road closures, evacuation zones, shelters, and so forth. We are providing that information 24/7 in English and Spanish with the opportunity to have interpretation. Much of the questions we get are from people who either don't have access to that information, and a common question is, am I in the evacuation zone? Is it required or optional at this point? And many of these people have a lot of barriers to accessing information. We're working very closely with the content provided through the Department of Emergency Services, but we're helping to broadcast that to populations who may not have direct access and need help navigating the system. Just in the past week, our average call time is about 14 minutes. So think about the time that our call specialists can take with folks to help them find out where to go for help and what that emergent information is. In the past week, we have had actually a relatively small number, 176 disaster contacts. And that's people specifically calling about this disaster, and we're able to give them the latest information that is aligned with what the official government sources are. We're also able to refer people to other non-emergency resources. And so the idea of having a comprehensive resource database is really important. as much as we have all been focusing on the current disaster, it's interesting to note that in the last week, only 28% of our calls were disaster related. And in fact, our infrastructure of 211 is able to continue to support people dealing with other crises and barriers that may have nothing to do with the current storms. And so since January, we have handled over 630 contacts related to the storms. And we are really appreciative of the support and collaboration with the County Office of Emergency Services. And we know that we have professional trained call specialists who are available around the clock to back up that information and the need for system navigation. This is something that is highlighted here currently during the current disaster, but it is part of our around the clock infrastructure that we need to keep up between disasters. And so this is a great window into the role of 211, and we're really proud to be able to step up and help our community in times of need. And I just want to remind people that we're always there, and people have their own personal disasters that many of us never hear about. Basic safety net services is what we're about, and the idea of collaborating and collecting and coordinating around those resources is really important to be able to serve our most vulnerable population. I don't know if you have time for, if you want questions, Nick.
Yeah, we'll get to questions in just a second, Katie. Scott Cohen, for some reason you're sharing your screen. If you could stop sharing your screen. I should have disabled screen share.
I'm glad that counter isn't for me.
Yeah. Scott, if you can hear me, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Katie, yes, we'll get to questions in just a second. I want to give the other guest speakers an opportunity to make some opening remarks as far as a situational update with the disaster response. All right, so our next guest is Kevin Drabinski. Kevin is the Caltrans' public information officer for the Central Coast region. I've known Kevin for many, many years. And Kevin, we're glad you were able to join us, and we appreciate our partnership with Caltrans.
Absolutely. Really, I guess the story of this winter would be partnerships and collaborations and working shoulder to shoulder, which is really the only way we get a community to begin to get on the road to recovery. And I'm speaking about a road today, which would be Highway 1 across the Pajaro River. And we were just able to get confirmation that we're looking to reopen Highway 1 across the Pajaro River later tonight. Our structural engineers, a complete team of them, were able to complete their assessments and reported out that those bridges can safely accommodate traffic without any restrictions. So that's good news. For the timing of it, we're looking to open the southbound lanes later this evening and the northbound lanes by tomorrow morning. And we will disseminate through social media exact timing of that once those lane openings become known. This isn't the end of our involvement with the bridges at Highway 1. We'll continue because of erosion of some support columns there. We'll continue to have construction crews on the bridge addressing that and restoring the soil under those bridge supports. We don't have an exact timeline for when that work might happen, but so that the community can be prepared over the next several months to expect lane closures. And as we develop a traffic plan in support of those closures, we'll let people know. The opening of Highway 1 is a small but important part of this recovery. We're hoping that it takes some traffic volume off of the surrounding regional roads. Like I mentioned, southbound lanes to reopen sometime this evening and northbound lanes to reopen by tomorrow morning. That's
right,
all I have for now.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. And I did get a question submitted that I just don't want to forget about. So just we'll answer it later. But people wanted to know about tree removal and trees down on California road, California highway. So we'll get back to that in just a minute. And next, I'd like to go to Rick Encarnacio. Rick is the head of our environmental health unit at our health department. And you know, I know there's been a lot of concerns, Rick, with environmental issues and the possibility of that after such a devastating flood event that we've had. So I'd like to welcome you and have you make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. Rick Encarnacion. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Environmental Health Bureau within the Health Department. My director is Elsa Jimenez. And for environmental health, we're the health inspectors for the county. And like what Nick mentioned, when it comes to disaster response, a lot of our role will be with the recovery and repopulation as we provide information on water systems, wastewater, and even during the event, we coordinate with the operators and stakeholders within and outside of the county, Public Works, Fire, Office of Emergency Services, Department of Emergency Management, to ensure proper information is disseminated, reporting is done properly, and obviously during their recovery, safety information is put out. And also we've also participated in ensuring basic emergency response supplies are provided, such as bottled water for affected communities. As of now, our teams are gearing up to participate in damage assessments to allow assessments moving forward, as the disaster is not over yet, but we just want to prepare ahead of time so that we have a speedy recovery. And with that, I'll stand by for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick and Elsa, for being here. We really appreciate it and appreciate the work you all do at the health department. I'd like to turn to our friends at the Public Works Department for the County of Monterey. We have Randy Ishii, the director of that department, as well as Tom Vonnegut, the assistant director. Randy, can you give us an update on the road situations in Monterey County, some infrastructure issues, and also maybe address the question we had earlier today from the media about trees down on county roads? Welcome, Randy.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate having all of you here with us today. As introduced, I'm Randy Ishii, Director of Public Works, Facilities, and Parks. With me is our Assistant Director, Tom Vonnegut, as introduced by our PIO, Nick Pasculli. Currently, and is our mission during any disaster event that affects the roads, the primary mission of our public works staff, who are working very hard, is to get the roads in a state where they can be reopened. As referenced by the Environmental Health Bureau, damage assessment teams have been stood up and are assessing different areas for repopulation here in these evacuation zones. On a parallel track, we are going out and assessing our roads as part of that damage assessment to determine if they're safe for people to use to return back to their homes. This is all in the spirit of public safety. And again, with that primary mission that we have of forewarning the public of road conditions and keeping the roads open and passable as best as possible. So as soon as these roads are made passable, we will be reopening them. And please look to our road closure information page, as well as the other sources that have been mentioned about Monterey County social media for those notifications or for that information of when the roads are reopened. As we do our damage assessments, we recognize that some of the work that needs to be done is going to involve time and most likely contracted effort in order to repair those roads. There are some examples down in the South County that can be seen. There's also examples in the North County that are going to make themselves evident. We'll work very expeditiously to get those repaired and reopened for the public. We look forward to any portents of disaster assistance or disaster relief funds that may come from our state and federal partners, as that will help greatly in this effort as we expeditiously try to make things back to where they were. And on the question about tree debris and trees along county roads, We do our best to put the information on a road closure information page, and our crews respond to those as quickly as possible, because here again, another road hazard that impedes the public's use of our roadways safely. So in those instances, we do try to address those as quickly as possible. That's one of our also primary missions. So if you do happen to see something like that, please say something and contact us at the Laurel Yard at area code 831-755-4925, or by email, or by our Monterey County UConnect app. With that, I'll hand the floor back over to you, Mr. Pasculli, and we'll be available for questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Randy. Appreciate that. And maybe if you could you maybe put that phone number in the chat, that'd be great, in case any of our media partners want to publish that number. Okay, so last night was a very a big night for the Water Resources Agency, and we have with us today the interim director of the Water Resources Agency, Dr. Lou Bauman. Dr. Bauman, thank you for joining us today, and welcome your comments in this your opening remarks.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everybody. And again, thank you for your coverage of this important event. And it is, of course, critical to the community and the larger state. As our colleague in Caltrans stated earlier, that partnership is key, and this event has been highlighted by partnership, not only between the local agencies, first responders, but our state responders, and we've been most grateful. Nature has been kind to us. We got very good news yesterday morning that the weather had shifted. And accordingly, Arroyo Seco River, Big Sur River, Carmel River, those are all in what we call their recession limbs, meaning that flows are dramatically decreasing and flood risks are rapidly diminishing, if non-existent in those locations. Our major concern has been amongst the Salinas and Pajaro River. As you know, they were able to, and when I say they, the Department of Water Resources contractor was able to close the breach last night and is currently in the process of rebuilding that structure with rock. They're making tremendous progress. They were able to add several additional feet of material since earlier in the day, and they will continue that work 24/7 until they can bring the rock up to the existing top of the levee. We also are experiencing what we call passage of the peak. Pretty much as we speak, once that peak passes and moves on downstream, again, we'll be in the recession phase, and that will allow the fields to drain and the water to exit through the river to the mouth of the Monterey Bay. Our next focus will be the Salinas River, and we're watching very closely. The peak is moving from Paso Robles at the upper reaches of the watershed, and it should be arriving at the Salinas River Spreckle Station roughly Friday morning. I think as we've all seen, these weather forecasts and the associated hydrographs or projected flows in the river are fluctuating. They're subject to change. We'll be watching that closely, and we're hopeful that those flows will be less than currently projected. So with that, I'd be pleased at the end to answer any questions. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Lou. We appreciate it. And of course, the work that has been done out on that levee is nothing short of miraculous. I know a lot of effort has gone in that 24/7, so we're grateful for that. And I know the residents are as well. Okay, with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions, and I'll recognize John Wolfolk first. And John, if you could introduce yourself and let everybody know what news bureau you're with. Go ahead, John.
Thank you very much. John Wolfolk at the San Jose Mercury News. And I wanted to ask Mr. Bauman or whoever else might know, just what does it look like in Pajaro right now? Is the water going down? You just mentioned something about the peak moving. I wasn't sure if that was the Pajaro or the Salinas, but if you could give us a sense as to what's happening with the water levels in Pajaro, and when is the water going to be off the streets and clear the way for people to come back?
I'll be pleased to answer that. When I was referring to the peak, those are the highest projected flows coming down the river from the Santa Clara and San Benito County. And so that is really the end of the projected flows for the next week or so. So once again, we're not expecting high flows or further potential floods into the community. With respect to the water levels, I have not had the opportunity to see the latest drone flights. My understanding is CAL FIRE has recently conducted one of those on our behalf. In regard to your very good question of when the river will drain, we have asked the Department of Water Resources Flood Operations Center to model that scenario. So we're currently in the process of sending them the appropriate geographical information, engineering information, and CAL FIRE recently flew a drone and will be sending that video imagery to them as well. We're not certain if they can predict it with accuracy, but we are waiting to hear back from them if they can determine when the significant waters will drain, allowing the emergency crews to begin in the remedial process.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, John, for your question. I'm going to go to the chat and then I'll go back to Ray, who has his hand up. This looks like a question for Katy from the United Way. Governor Newsom mentioned in his press conference today the United Way and support for farm workers. Do you have any information on the $42 million the governor announced for farm work families because of the flood, or have you not received that information yet?
So I believe the funding that was discussed had to do with the USDA farm worker relief program that was COVID related. We actually applied as part of our state association over a year ago to be part of that distribution network. And it's just this month starting to flow as far as the funding. We've been allocated a small portion of funding through our state association for Monterey County. And I know other local United Ways are also distributing that relief. It is technically not flood related. It was a COVID package from the federal government. But there is, I think, a fair amount of breadth in how people qualify for that. We are just now setting up our implementation. So I don't have any more information on how people are going to access that here in Monterey County.
Okay, thank you, Katy. And we'll try to follow up and get that information as you can probably understand. I think Victor Guzman asked the question. The governor had meetings with some of our county officials, which they have not come back yet. So once we get that information, we'll be certain to share that and pass that along. So thank you. And Victor, I want to apologize in advance. Unfortunately, we do not have our Spanish interpreter with us today to respond to the questions in Spanish. So I apologize for that in advance. Okay, we're going to go to Ray, who's got his hand raised. Ray, you want to introduce yourself and what news outlet you're with?
Yeah, this is Ray Mashaki, Monterey County Weekly. Thank you all for your time today. Katy, just to follow up on that, I know it sounds like you guys are still kind of trying to figure out what, the implementation of that farm worker assistance. In January, it seems like you guys were able to kind of get that out the door with, the local assistance center that was set up in Spreckles. You guys were one of the, nonprofits working there, handing out cash relief cards at the time. I know you guys it sounds like you're still figuring out the details, but is that going to be like a similar sort of approach, for people in need, like giving out direct financial assistance? Is that something we can expect? And sorry, to follow up on it, I had another question, but I can get back in line. But it had to do with water resources. But I don't know if
Yeah, let's have that. Go ahead, Katy.
Thank you, Ray. So on that relief that we refer to as the USDA relief, as you might imagine, there is need to coordinate and reduce duplication. So there's actually a national database and some verification that's involved to make sure that people are getting essentially, you know, one per customer. We know there's a lot of, you know, easy room for error for people that move between communities. We are not the only agency distributing this relief. There are several other organizations, even within our own community. So there's a national verification process that we need to study and make sure we know how to utilize in order to be good stewards of that fund, of those funds. So to answer your question, it will be different than those cash relief cards that we distributed in Spreckles. That was through a private foundation and it had different criteria and it was very localized.
All right, thank you, Katie,
Thank
for
you.
that. And I'm going to go to the chat, and then I'll go to we'll go to Scott after the chat question. This is a question for environmental health. Rick, this is from Victor Guzman with KION Telemundo. We were told environmental health is who we should reach out to about water quality in Pajaro area or other areas where water restrictions are in place. Is there any sense of what specific chemicals may have made its way into the water supply in those places, Pajaro water system, Sunny Mesa, and San Ardo?
Thank you for the question, Victor Guzman. I did provide like a little answer there in the chat. We do have our public information line. That's 831-755-4505. Environmental Health Bureau could answer questions on water quality. Just for your information and everybody's information, the local environmental health, we regulate different sizes of water systems, Pajaro, Sunny Mesa, and San Ardo. These are larger, what we call public water systems that we regulate or are regulated by the state. Regardless, we can still provide information on water quality. We work with the water system operators and with the state to ensure safe drinking water during and even when there's no disasters. We regularly monitor and provide testing. Are there any specific chemicals that we're concerned with? No. We look for general indicators of contamination. So the well water will be tested for coliform bacteria and VOCs or volatile organic chemicals. And from there, we can determine the quality of water for it to be safe to drink.
Thank you, Rick. We appreciate your response. I'll go back to the hands raised and let's go to Scott Cohen. Scott?
Thanks very much. From KAZU. A three-part question for Lou Bauman. The repairs that have been done on the levee, closing the gap, how is it in terms of strength compared to what it was before? Are there any other areas along the levee that you're concerned about? And what's the update on the secondary breach at mile 1? Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for those questions. The current repair is literally a rock repair, so there is no concerns about the integrity of that. My understanding is they will add visqueen as well. So again, that is a very strong structure. The entire levee is monitored both by Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, and it is of the same integrity that has been all these years. So again, during high events, those are constantly monitored. And remind me the second part of your question.
The secondary breach that opened up at mile 1, what's the status of that?
Again, that's in the lower reaches, and that provided some hydraulic relief. That has not been our primary focus at this phase. We want to protect the upper reaches, and then we'll work with the Pajaro Regional Flood Management Agency and the Corps of Engineers to begin repairs, not only on that breach, but on the damaged breach below the Highway 1 bridge and the repair of the upper breach, if you will, in the upper portion of the Pajaro area.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to Thomas Hughes. Thomas, please ask your question and let us know what agency you're with.
Thanks. Yeah, Thomas Hughes with Bay City News, and I'll direct the questions to you, Nicholas, and you might delegate as you see fit. I thought somebody from the sheriff's office might be here, but one question I was finding unanswered is is there an estimate of how many people are still in Pajaro who never evacuated?
You know, that's a really good question, Thomas, and I do not have that answer. I certainly will find out. The sheriff and the undersheriff were with the governor, and that's why they didn't make it back in time for this briefing. So I apologize for that. So if you wouldn't mind, after this briefing, can we get together on the phone, and I will try to track down that information for you.
That would be great. And then, sir, if we're to double up, if there's projected that the flows are, past their peak basically, or the peak will match what we just previously saw, is there any plan to lift those mandatory evacuations along the Salinas River, have people confirming they're still active as of now, mandatory evacuations, have people heeded those evacuations, and do you anticipate, downgrading that to a warning anytime soon, given the change in forecast?
Yes, that's a great question. In fact, those things are being evaluated right now. I can tell you that we just put out an evacuation warning lifting for the areas of the Salinas River and Elkhorn Slough. And then also about 2:12, the evacuation warning was listed for areas of River Road from Highway 68 to Fort Romeo Road. And I would suspect that there'll be more coming this afternoon. Those are done, they're all evaluated by public safety as well as the Department of Emergency Management. And when they reach a concurrence, they will issue new information. So we will post those on social media as well as through our twice daily situational update that we'll send out to the media. So that'll be updated this afternoon and then later this evening.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Anything else, Thomas, before I go to Kalyssa?
If you're going to let me sneak one more in, I would ask Lou just to speak on the accuracy of the hydrographs, because as we report out, things are at flood stage or beyond, monitor stage, flood stage for the Salinas River. Is that accurate? Is that really the flood stage? Because I know there was reports that those are not accurate. And as people, just to empower people with the information, because I know a lot of people are checking those hydrographs, they're looking at the mandatory evacuations and trying to make decisions. Do we report that as the flood stage, or should we avoid doing that?
Thomas, that's an excellent question. And again, you have to keep in mind that these are models of a complex natural system. And if you look at the Salinas watershed, for example, it's over 4,000 square miles. It goes way into San Luis Obispo County. So those models have to take into account meteorological conditions, inflow to the stream, infiltration into the aquifers, and potential spillage, as an example, over breaches into farm fields. So those are the very best information that we have. And one of the reasons that the California and Nevada River Forecast Center updates those is that gives them the opportunity to run those models, reevaluate the inputs, and put out their very best estimate again. And we understand that it is frustrating to the community to not know specifically when a flood is going to happen, and to our emergency teams of when to issue warnings and evacuation notices. But we have to understand that that's the best science that we currently have available.
Thank you, Lou. All right. I know I butchered your name. I'm so sorry. Is it, help me pronounce it. Is it Kyra?
Kiara Harris.
Kyra Harris. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead with your question. And what news agency are you with?
The Monterey County Weekly.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to circle back to Highway 1 a little bit. This question for Mr. Drabinski. Is there any plans to do like repairs on other roads? I know you talked about after opening Highway 1, there will probably be crews in the future getting back on there to make structural repairs. Are there plans for other roads, and are there other worries on Highway 1 other than the beams holding it up, like potholes or cracks in the road, things like that?
Well, the rain kind of subsided yesterday, And today has been, for the bulk of Highway 1 in the region, an assessment day of conditions. So we're still discovering slides, potholes, things of that nature, either making the repair on the spot or programming that for a repair to come forward. For the state highway system, the reopening of Highway 1 at this location should take some of the volume off of the regional roads, which aren't accustomed to bearing the capacity that they've had to do before. The only sections of Highway 1 that remain of concern are down on the Big Sur coast. So we're evaluating slip outs of lanes and slide activity on the entire run of the inside the closure, which is currently from just south of Deachin's Big Sur in Monterey County, all the way down to San Luis Obispo County and Ragged Point. That's been closed for some time. There's a major slide at Paul Slide, which will take a long time to open up. And we're continuing to address smaller slides and slip outs in that area. So that's kind of the run for Highway 1. But for the most part, also in Santa Cruz County on Highway 9, the Holiday Slide, it looks like that suffered additional slide activity over this last rain. And our crews are out there removing the slide material. And by the end of the week, we'll have an assessment on when that roadway might be able to reopen.
Thank you, Kevin. Very much appreciate that answer. Let's go to Josh. Josh, go ahead with your question.
This is Josh, KSBW. My question is, Norm, I see you're there. I hope you're ready to answer questions today. I don't know if you'll have the answer to this, but I was wondering if you could tell me how many miles of the Salinas River in Monterey County are private levees versus public levees maintained by the county itself?
Sure. The vast majority of the Salinas River is privately owned. So the vast majority of those levees are private responsibility or privately responsible to the landowner or the farm operator, depending on that arrangement. The only places where it is probably considered public would be along the reclamation ponds from the various different cities and maybe the banks along San Lorenzo Park in King City. But other than that, it is all privately owned.
Thank you, Norm, for answering that for Josh. Josh, any other questions from KSPW?
That is it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. Let's go to Ray. Has got his hand raised.
Hi, yeah, Ray again with Monterey County Weekly. Mr. Bauman, just to follow up on just the projections. Obviously, it seems like depends on what the severity of the rain in the future might be. And hopefully not as severe as what we've seen, but it seems like, it's still going to be kind of a wet month through the rest of March. And I know Shauna talked a bit about, in previous calls about the distributions from the Nacimiento Reservoir as required to kind of make sure that you have that buffer zone at the top of the reservoir. Is there like a concern that, can you tell me a little bit about the thinking that goes in behind those distributions or those releases? And, is there a concern that, if we have more rain in the forecast and, potentially exacerbating the river flows over the next week or so, and then you have couple that with distributions that, that could maybe exacerbate some flooding conditions? Just want to know kind of the thinking that goes behind all that and the effect to which you're monitoring all that and kind of what goes into those decisions and whether there's a risk there moving forward.
Certainly. Thank you for that question, Ray. And again, for the members of the press, I think as I understand Ray's question, as the reservoir in the image behind me of Nacimiento, as that reservoir fills from drainage from the upper watersheds in the Santa Lucia Mountains, and those waters are released, they add to the flows in the Salinas River. So the question is what is the thinking in terms of operating the reservoir with inflows coming into the reservoir being mindful of outflows and contributing to flood flows in the Salinas River. The agency operates those according to their adopted operations manual, which takes into account a number of factors. But in general, the volume of the reservoir has certain levels, classification levels, and the top level is called a flood pool. And then below that is called a conservation pool. And the intent is to operate the reservoir maintaining a flood pool, which is about 66,000 acre feet plus or minus, to ensure that there's adequate capacity in the reservoir for subsequent flood events. And that's why it is necessary pursuant to the operations manual to release and provide adequate flood pool. So the intent is to maximize water for conservation purposes, but ensure that you're operating the facility safely by maintaining the flood pool.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And Ray, thank you for your question. Are there any other questions for any of our guests today before we conclude our meeting?
Yeah,
today?
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that. So I mean, you know, like obviously it sounds like your hands are tied on those releases, right? But I mean, you have to, you know, there's a manual, like you said, that's kind of what's required to kind of ensure that it's being operated correctly. But, you know, so is there a concern, is there monitoring of the situation when you're talking about, you know, us potentially not being past these flood events, you know, moving forward, if there's more rain to come, and then coupled with those releases, like that's something that I imagine has to be top of mind of the Water Resources Agency, right? When you're thinking about like, could this potentially exacerbate flood conditions further downstream, right? I mean, I know it's early and we haven't seen those rains yet and what it would look like, but I'm sure it's something that, you know, is a possibility, right?
Yes, and again, we're well aware of the hydrographs and the flow in the Salinas River, as well as inflows. So it's a balancing act of minimizing impact to the river flows and ensuring safe operation of the reservoir. And our teams at Monterey County Water Resources are monitoring this during these events 24/7 to maximize public safety and minimize flood flows and ensure safe operation of the reservoir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Especially want to thank our guests for the time to provide this information to the media. It's very, very important that we continue to keep open channels of communication with the media. So thank you all guests, and thank you to our media partners for being here today. Have a great rest of your day, and we will come back tomorrow at 2 p.m. with another press briefing. And tomorrow's focus is going to be on disaster relief and services for victims. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.